Hello, welcome to our next vlog. I have been trying to make this particular vlog for a long time, and I keep starting and then stopping and then saying, no, I don't want to publish this. It doesn't sound very good and whatever. Because this is kind of a difficult topic to talk about, and I am by no means an expert. And because I am not an expert, it makes me feel like I shouldn't talk about the subject. But the more I've been thinking about it, the more important it is for people who are not experts to at least express how they feel and express their own experiences. And so today I would like to talk about autism. So first of all, why do I want to talk about autism? It seems a little bit of a strange topic, does it not? And it's because a couple of years ago, I discovered something about myself, and that is that I'm fairly certain that I am autistic. It wasn't something that I was necessarily expecting to find. It wasn't something that I was looking for because I was struggling. It was something that kind of crept up on me, and the reason why was because, for whatever strange reason, I had been watching a lot of YouTube videos around the topic, and I hadn't ever actually watched one on autism. And so the YouTube algorithm just suggested it to me. And it suggested it to me like so many times that eventually I was like, fine, you know what? I'm going to watch one and just see what it's about. And so I watched one on the signs of autism in women that are very often overlooked. And I looked at the list and I was like, oh, yes, 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 yes. No, I don't have that one. Yes, yes. And the more they said, the more I realized that I had a lot of the symptoms of autism. I don't think most people have all of them. I think that it's fairly common for people to have some and not all. But I have come to realize that I'm fairly certain that I am autistic, and I've always been autistic. And when I look back on my life, I realize that there have been a lot of signs of that. So first of all, my childhood, I think that's when it's the most easy to see, where the most obvious signs come out. And I think that's because we haven't yet learned social cues to hide them. So the earliest signs, I think, was my mother always telling me these stories of that I didn't want to go to other people when I was a small child. She had a hard time giving me up because I would cry and scream. That's fairly typical of an autistic child. However, I was quite intelligent and I used to teach myself things. Also typical of an autistic child is that they want to teach themselves things. It's just kind of the way they work. I taught myself to read at a young age. I don't know exactly how old. I mean, I was there, but I don't remember it clearly enough to know how old I was. But it was before I started school. And I just feel like that's kind of a typical autistic thing to do, yes? Another thing was that I was quite shy as a child. I was very introverted. In the first grade, I tested into the gifted program, and my teacher considered moving me up a grade. But they decided not to. And there were two main reasons why. And number one was that my older brother was just 1 year ahead of me in school. And another reason why was because I didn't have any friends in the first grade, and they thought that if they pushed me up to the second grade, then I would have even less of a chance to make friends, and that I was already struggling socially. The child who is gifted but is not moved up in grades because they have no friends might be autistic. Like, when you think back of those signs together, that is such a blatant red flag. Like, that should have been a red flag. I'm not sure why nobody caught it. I think it was because I didn't really have any needs, any like support needs really. At the time, I didn't really struggle with things being too loud. I don't remember struggling with that, although I do remember crying at home when things got very chaotic. And everybody always asked me, "Why are you crying? It's not even about you." I don't know. you know, I just didn't feel comfortable. And I think that that was also a sign of autism. Um, and the older I got, I would always have like one friend that I would totally overshare everything with. And I didn't really have a lot of other friends. I am an oversharer. In case you hadn't noticed, sometimes I get oversharey on this vlog. Um, and it's only as an adult that I was able to look back on these things and recognize different signs of autism. How does it affect me today? Today, there are a couple of different things that I do that are typical of people who are autistic. That is not necessarily a sign of autism. It is just that put all together, they form kind of a larger picture of an autistic person. And the things that I do today that are more typical autistic is that, first of all, I love being alone. I really love being alone. People think that, oh, aren't you lonely? Don't you want a new partner or some? People ask me that all the time. Aren't you going to be dating again? No, thanks. I'm good. yeah. I mean, I do get lonely if I'm alone for too long. But when I do talk to people, I totally overshare. Um, as I just said, I'm an oversharer. I describe myself as an open book. Like, I don't hide anything, and yet people seemed to not understand me still. It always was a mystery to me how that can go together, because I don't hide anything really. I'm not terribly secretive, but somehow people don't understand me anyway. And I think it's because of the what I do choose to share. But the other thing is that I also am very uncomfortable in large groups of people. I sometimes feel overwhelmed just being around too many people. Like, they don't even necessarily need to be talking or like talking to me or talking about me or whatever. I just don't like being in crowds. I can handle it to a certain extent, but when it gets too loud or too chaotic, I feel very uncomfortable. And so social interaction, social like situations, I tend to just withdraw. One of my coping mechanisms is just to talk to one specific person. And so I'll sit in the side and just have a conversation with a person that I like, that I trust. But if I'm expected to like meet new people in that situation, I probably won't. I also don't know what to say to somebody new. I seemed to be very awkward in that sense. Um, and yeah, it's just, it is what it is. Yeah. Um, Also at home, I tend to be very sensitive to noise. If my children have the TV up too loud, or if they start playing too loudly, I try not to get on their nerves about it, but I will very blatantly close my bedroom door. I don't want to hear it. Yeah. So that's probably one of the bigger ones that's more obvious. I just don't like the sound. I just don't, it hurts my ears. It literally hurts my ears. I'm also quite sensitive to the cold. If it gets too cold in the apartment, I will always turn on the heat, and I don't even care how much it costs at that point. It's like, I will not live in a cold house. I don't live in a cold house, and I will turn on the heat, whether you like it or not. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, like, basically, I just don't like living like that. I've also discovered that very, very, very few people understand my humor. When I make a joke, people won't get it. Like, I'm trying to be funny. I thought it was funny, but nobody else understands it. It's very awkward sometimes. Another thing is that if somebody tells a joke that I don't find funny because it's either offensive or it's unnecessary, or it could be offensive to someone else and I just don't appreciate it, I absolutely can't laugh at it. I just look at somebody like, okay. And they're like, oh, don't you get it? And I'm like, I got it. I just didn't think it was funny. And it makes people very uncomfortable. So welcome to my life, making people feel uncomfortable. But it's one of those moments where you realize and recognize things in yourself. Another thing that is pretty typical of an autistic person is to dress kind of semi-androgynously. And I totally do. I also do not enjoy wearing makeup, and it feels foreign on my skin, and I feel the need to wash my face when I have it on. I don't like the feel of makeup. It's a sensory thing. I also don't particularly enjoy being touched in general. I mean, I don't mind hugging my kids and, doing things for them. It's not like I would ever say, hey, no, don't ever touch me. But I get touched out really, really easily. So if I get my kids hanging on me, then I'll have to sometimes be like, okay, please stop for a little bit. I need a breather. And I'm the same way with the partner. And that's not necessarily a good thing, especially if you have a touchy-feely kind of a partner. So a lot of people will be kind of turned off by that. But in general, I feel like if you are just willing to accept my boundaries and say, okay, I will respect that and I will stop touching you when you ask, then we can get along just fine. Yeah, so as far as like all of those things go, it's very typical of an autistic person to feel this way. I have thought about this a lot, and I think that it's because of this autistic background and then whenever I hear someone talk about an autistic person and how difficult someone is because they're autistic, I really don't appreciate people saying that, because being an autistic person doesn't automatically make you difficult, okay? It does mean that you might need an accommodation or two. But another thing is excusing things because someone is autistic. Acting like you can't understand the difference or you can't understand right and wrong because you're autistic. That's a load of crap. Throw that flippin' out the window, okay? An autistic person is just as capable of understanding right and wrong. In fact, if anything, an autistic person has a stronger sense of right and wrong than most people. I would even say that they have a very strong sense of justice in general, and they really dislike injustice because they're so flippin' black and white. Like, we just think of things like, this is correct, this is not correct. We are black and white kind of people. Don't like the gray areas. We recognize that they're there and we'll acknowledge them. That doesn't mean we like them. And we would prefer it if things were black and white. And I think that in that sense, that it's even worse if an autistic person commits a crime, because they definitely know better. I'm telling you right now, they know better. Just because someone is autistic doesn't make them mentally impaired. All right, I would like to put that out there. It does mean that they may need some accommodations when it comes to sensory overwhelm. That is probably my biggest issue. And like in big crowds, and you could excuse them for being overly honest in a conversation. You could excuse them for being slightly rude in some sort of very special social situation that they didn't quite read properly. That is all something you can excuse for being autistic. What you cannot excuse is a very, very poor behavior, like hurting someone else and saying, oh, it's because they're autistic. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like, if somebody's having a meltdown and they need space, it's probably best to give them that space. However, if you're trying to like attack somebody and like hold them down while they're having a meltdown, that's not a good idea, by the way. I don't recommend that. Give the autistic person space, back off, speak to them calmly, don't force them to look you in the eye, and just have a conversation about how they're feeling and what's going on and how you can support them. That is what's the best way to handle things. I've also discovered that I am very good with autistic children. I can spot it a mile away now. I used to not be able to, but I can now tell very quickly if someone is probably autistic just by the way that they act and observing their behavior. It's really quite fascinating how few people recognize it too. They're like, yeah, but that child is speaking just fine. It's not a speech problem. Not all autistic people have speech problems. Some autistic people have difficulties communicating their feelings with language, but they don't generally have speech problems. So, as I said at the beginning, I am by no means an expert on this subject, but um, children who are autistic tend to be very literal. They tend to do things the way they think they ought to be done. They tend to not necessarily understand that they need to work well with others because that's not important to them. It's kind of a low priority. So I would say, as far as like social creatures go, an autistic person is low on the social needs section, but high on the needs social supports section, you know. So I would say they need more support to get through life, and they tend to be a touch on the rude side, but they also tend to need the least amount of social interaction. Like, they don't really miss it. Like, oh, you want me to do this project on my own instead of in a group? I'm good with that. Yeah. And they tend to be good with that. It's all good. They would be the kind of person to choose that over doing a group project. Now, once again, no one of these symptoms of autism is definitive as like a basis for a diagnosis. All I'm saying is that all of them put together paint a picture of someone who needs more social supports, who isn't necessarily comfortable in certain social settings. That's really all autism is. And I think that too many people make too big of a deal out of it and think that it's some sort of horrible disability. If you have an autistic child or an autistic family member, they're just people. They're just people. Don't forget that. And they can live on their own. Like, I live on my own. I take care of my 2 children. I have a full-time job. I am fine. And there are lots of people who can be too. And I know that not everyone has the same support needs. But I think that most autistic people are able to handle life in general. Some with more supports than others is all. And I have some friends who I ask about social interactions when I am trying to resolve a conflict or something. That's something I'm not necessarily good at, and so I will ask others for their opinions, and people that I trust, people that are very good socially, and that I can talk to about these things. But in general, I think that being autistic really isn't as terrible a thing as many people paint it out to be. The highest support that people need is when they are young people in school. Anyway, I hope that that enlightens you a little bit about autism in general. If you have any questions for me, leave them in the comments below. And I hope that you will understand that autism is not a scary thing. So anyway, I'll see you hopefully in the next vlog.